presentation, so if you've seen it before, it's not all new. And we'll just start with that. And if you have any questions, we'll just have a discussion afterwards.
And for those of you who have seen this before, thank you for sitting through it again. I promise you there is some new information in there. And if you can tell me what has changed since the last time you slide, you get a prize before the meeting is over. So basically, why do we need a comprehensive plan? And it's a planning document intended as a guide for the town. It's a chance for communities to make policy and land use decisions that should serve us well for the next 10 to 15 years. And the whole planning process is an opportunity for our community to come together and look at where we are and plan for where we'd like Brownfield to be in the future. What a comprehensive plan is not, there's been some confusion about this. It's not a rule, a statute, or an ordinance. Nothing is set in stone in the plan. There are certain recommendations that can be proposed to the select board, the planning board, or other town-appointed groups for approval. Others would have to be adopted at town meeting. So there's nothing set in stone. Before they would go into effect, the town has a say in what should or should not happen. It does not commit the town to expending any resources, and it does not mandate anything. Any proposed expenditures would have to go through the normal budgeting process, and many would have to be approved at town meeting before any money is spent. So, why was writing a new plan an important thing to do? Because we did have a good plan from 1991, but that is the last one that is on file as an official comprehensive plan, and comp plans should be reviewed every 5 years and updated every 10 years. So, according to the state, a plan is considered no longer consistent with the Maine State Growth Management Act after 12 years, and the contents must be updated. The 1991 plan was an excellent plan, but it pledged an annual review and update, and several amendments were approved by voters in 1995. But this 2023 plan provides that necessary update with input from the population that has grown since 1991, when we had 1,160 population, and now we have a population of 1,631. So there are about 500 new residents. The 2023 plan does align with the Maine State Growth Management Act of 2008, and it has already passed the state review for consistency. This question was raised at our first meeting, what is meant by an update. So the actual dictionary definition is to make something more modern or up to date, pretty simple. In the 1991 comprehensive plan, there's a statement that says, the town will continue to update and refine this comprehensive plan. New data will be added as things change in town, population, housing, transportation, fiscal, and economic information. A new survey of the public's opinions and needs will be conducted, goals will be reviewed and refined where necessary, and implementation measures will be studied to determine their effectiveness. So can the State Planning Office just reaffirm our old plan, our 1991 plan? And the answer to that is no, the state will not. Should a community choose to submit a plan to the State Planning Office, it would have to be reviewed for completeness with the current standards, the state standards. Among other things, the data has to be refreshed, conclusions based on that data re-examined, and implementation strategies brought up to date. Until the plan is reviewed for consistency, its status would remain unknown in State Planning Office records. So why does the state need to approve the plan? Comprehensive plans must be aligned with the Maine State Growth Management Act of 2008 to be considered consistent with the law. And it's pretty explicit that the 1991 plan couldn't be consistent with the act that wasn't passed until 2008. A comprehensive plan approved by the state makes municipalities eligible for state grants and loans, such as community development block grants. So why would this benefit Brownfield? Community block development grants provided many towns with funding for all of the things you see listed there. This is just a few of them. There are hundreds of grants that towns have received. But community center upgrades, fire stations, road reconstruction, business facade improvements, downtown revitalization studies, streetscape improvements, landscaping, home repair network, housing rehab, adult daycare programs. You can look online on the state's website and you'll see the listings of hundreds of grants that various towns have received. So other Maine towns are going through the same process that we are, thinking about, do they need a comprehensive plan, and how they're going to go about developing one. I thought it was interesting, we looked into what some other towns were doing, and the Casco Board of Selectmen, they actually hired the Portland Council of Government to facilitate their comp plan process, and the board voted that the cost was not to exceed $72,500 to get help with their comp plan. Bridgeton voted to hire a consultant at a cost not to exceed $80,000. And with a cost estimate of $95,000 to hire a firm to help the community with the comprehensive plan process, the Naples Board of Selectmen decided they're just going to start saving money for a new comprehensive plan. That price quote also came from the Greater Portland Council of Governments, according to the Naples Town Manager, John Hawley. And this is just a few examples. But I thought the interesting thing was that the town of Brownfield taxpayers have paid $0 for comprehensive plan consultant services because it was all done by volunteers and with input from the community. So it's cost the town nothing for the comprehensive plan that you have there in front of them. So how did this all get started? The Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee was created in 2018 by the town's selectmen, and their task was to update the town's comprehensive plan from 1991. Over the past 5 years, we have involved the public in developing the comprehensive plan. There were 4 surveys conducted. Some of them were individual interviews. There was a direct mailing. There was online and paper copies of surveys in the town office and on the town website to gather input from the public on a variety of issues. Of those 4 surveys, we received 605 responses, and all of those responses are tabulated, and in the back of your comprehensive plan, you can view them all there. We also had open meetings conducted. Most of them had a Zoom option when we were able. We distributed materials at the last town meeting in June of 2022. We've also had multiple informational meetings. I believe we had 4 informational meetings, and then this public hearing. All of these steps were advertised in the newspaper, posted on the town's website, and on the town marquee. Every plan has to have a vision statement, and this is the vision statement for our plan. Our vision for the upcoming decade is to establish realistic strategies that will enable the implementation of constructive measures for maintaining the current rural atmosphere and improving the quality of life for as many Brownfield residents as possible. As far as the content of the plan, if you don't mind, I direct you to the green handout. If you didn't get one, just let us know. We can grab one for you. They were out on the signing table.
I'll get it.
And what you see up on the screen is the table of contents of the plan, but every plan has required elements from the state. So the required elements are listed at the bottom of the first green sheet. Every plan has to have a vision statement. It has to have a summary of public participation. And our plan, that public participation summary begins on page 109. And we also had to include a regional coordination program. So you had to explain how the town of Brownfield was trying to work with other towns in the region to accomplish various things that could be better done if it was done in coordination with other towns. There also has to be a plan implementation section, because in the past, a lot of towns took their plans and just let them sit on a shelf and never used them. So the state now expects you to have an implementation plan. And what we hope to do is put together an implementation committee, should the plan pass after the town vote in June. We'd love to have more people involved. And an implementation committee just means people who are interested in certain things that are in the plan, and there are topics that they might be interested in participating in. So if you're interested in historic and archaeological resources, let us know. We'd love to have people involved in that. If you're interested in housing, recreation, what we hope to do is put together small groups of people who would look at the strategies and say, what do we think is worth pursuing and what should we do? Because the state actually comes back in 5 years and will say to the town of Brownfield, okay, we saw all of your strategies, what have you done with them? They don't want to hear that the plan's been sitting on the shelf for 5 years. Then there are inventory chapters. So chapters 1 through 13 are inventory chapters, and they are listed in this green handout. We have them listed for each chapter, and what we included here were the questions that the state expected to have answered in each of these chapters. So you'll see the first one, historic and archaeological resources. All those questions listed there, the state said, we expect to see this in your plan. We expect you to answer, are there any historic patterns of settlement still evident in the community? Because when the state reviewed the plan, they went to these questions and then looked at our plan and said, did you address this in your plan? So we use that as our guide in writing each of these chapters. We first answered the state's questions the best we could with a lot of input from others. And then for each chapter, they expect you to have goals listed and strategies. And we try to be very careful with our strategies, so at no time do we say, the select board must do this by this date. Instead, we worded it to say, we should look into or discuss with the select board if it would be valuable to pursue a certain thing or not. It wasn't us saying everybody will do this. The plan for the implementation is for each of those strategies, we'll be revisiting them in the next few years. And you'll see there's that same information for each chapter in this handout. So when writing the plan, we try to include some of Brownfield's history, so that the plan included where Brownfield has been, where we've been in the past, because that's important to everyone. Illustrate where we are now, so we look at a lot of data from town, from state websites, everywhere we could to update the plan to make it more accurate, or as accurate as we could make it. But more importantly, imagining where we can go from here. So how do you envision Brownfield in the future, and what it will take to get us there? So some people have expressed concern about too much town planning and is giving up local control, but in fact it doesn't mean giving up local control, it means using local control to take charge of the future. Because once a town loses local control, it won't be the state guiding things, it'll be developers and market conditions and other outside forces that determine what our town becomes rather than the people of Brownfield. What this all means is that if we as a community don't attempt to determine our town's future, then it will be determined for us. And I think what we all hope is, how do we keep Brownfield as the beautiful rural town that we all love? That's what we heard a lot about in the surveys. I thought this was an interesting illustration from a recent Daily Sun article. This is North Conway, then and now. So the first picture is of a historic postcard around 1912. That's the same intersection as you see in the second picture. It's Pier Sergeant Main in North Conway. The first postcard reminded me a little bit of Brownfield now, and I'm hoping the second picture isn't what Brownfield would turn into. So I think we need to think about where we want Brownfield to go. So the next steps from this day forward is we're hoping you're all going to vote yes. On June 13th, this will be a referendum item. We hope you talk to your neighbors about it. Let's take advantage of all the progress we've made and take the final step of adopting the plan. We need you. We need the town people to help with this, to spread the word as much as you can, and to come and vote. Very important. I also wanted to say a special thank you to everyone who has provided feedback, suggested revisions to the plan, responded to surveys, and offered ideas and help to make this the best plan possible. At all of our informational meetings, we got a lot of feedback, things that people felt should be revised and changed. As a matter of fact, we listed all the revisions in this yellow document. So those of you who made suggestions at earlier informational meetings, or if you heard requests or feedback or suggested revisions, you'll probably see a lot of them here because the plan is to reflect what the town people want. So we hope to include as many of those revisions as needed or as requested. So that's kind of where we are now, and we're hoping that tonight we hear more of your questions, your thoughts, your feedback, because this is kind of our last public meeting, we think, until the June vote. So any of your thoughts would be welcome, any reactions, any questions, and we'll try to answer them the best we can.
If anybody has a question, just stand, state your name. Any comments?
I have a comment. I'm not up there, I'm here. Throughout the years of my being here, I have met and realized there are so many people in this town that are brilliant, they're creative, they care about the land. And I envision some of these people getting together and seeing what we could do to protect the environment, make it better. Just an example out of my head, chestnut trees along Main Street. Our water is in peril, and we need a lot of people to keep their eyes open. Care for it. Has anybody heard wood frogs? I don't know where my green frogs are. They're gone. They just said, bye, I'm out of here. Fortunately, I have a vernal pool. But does anybody know what a vernal pool is? Does anybody know that vernal pools, it's illegal to work certain distance from them? And these are species that are only able to reproduce from a vernal pool. Just an example, but like I said, I'm amazed at the people here and in town that have a heart for the environment in this town. I'm done.
Any other questions, comments?
I just want to thank you for all your hard work. You know, the figures up there were shocking. If you have somebody outside your town that doesn't know your town at all, figure out all this angles, all this.
Thanks, Jean.
All there is. Yeah.
I second that.
Thank you. Thank you.
It is, Holly has been, yeah, it's a remarkable document, and, you know, showing the depth of information that's in there about the history of where we were, and so much information about what Brownfield has to offer. And then, you know, as you had said, you know, it's not a mandate, it's not a directive, it's just asking questions, and asking all of us to look deeper into where do we see our town going, and what do we want, what's best for our communities. And so thank you for your hard work.
Thanks, Holly. You know, that's interesting when you talk about the history and all the information. Joe and I are relatively new to Brownfield compared to some of our team members who have been here for 47 years, but it was an interesting learning experience for us because it really required, to answer those questions from the state, it required a lot of research. It was fabulous for me because I learned so much about Brownfield, and glad we're here.
Any other questions or comments? So the next step is
June 13th.
June 13th.
Referendum vote.
Will there be signs, like signs available for yard signs? Is that something that?
We hadn't talked about that, but that's a good suggestion.
I'm in marketing.
Hire her. She's hired. Hire her.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's, you know,
You can put one in my yard.
I don't know if there's probably not a budget, but if we have a bake sale, we get a or, I don't know.
That's a good suggestion.
Yeah, let me know if I can help.
We were thinking of doing a mailing to, you know, everybody who, I guess is full-time, is that what it's going with?
Yeah, yeah.
Just as a reminder.
How was the, book paid for? If you didn't have a budget, if you had no budget?
So, the town paid for the copying of the production of the,
Yeah, I think the point was that the town didn't pay for a consultant. We didn't, pay a lump sum. I mean, obviously there's some copying and some printing, but I think we probably came in under $1,500, if not considerably less than that. I know we did a mailing cost like $250 a couple of years ago. Comparative to $95,000, which regardless, if we, we're still off below that.
Yes, and
Some
we
of
did
those.
the first survey out of our own pockets, and we put up, to get people to respond, we had a lottery drawn for $100. We're dedicated to it.
whatever it takes.
Yes.
And isn't it true that if we didn't do this, that then the state's rules were gonna slide in and there? Isn't there something like that? Do I remember that, or am I thinking wrong?
I think that it's kind of constantly evolving, where, certain things that were requirements no longer are, but, then if you have a plan, it's getting more consideration, so it's kind of hard to nail down exactly how it's considered. But what we try to do is we reach out to the state, ask the state, does it matter to you if we have a comprehensive plan? In some cases, there's things you can't do unless you have a comprehensive plan. In others, it sounds like it's
Because you guys
valuable,
apply for
but,
grants is a wonderful option.
yeah.
Thank you.
Well,
Good.
Oh, no, go.
so and then the other piece of that you addressed in the presentation was that market forces, development, business, I mean, they will drive what we turn into if we don't have a plan in place.
Yeah, I'm sure you all hear the rumors about, there's a big development going up here, or they're putting this in down the road, and, it'd be good to have some idea of, what we need to do to kind of keep the town manageable in the way it is.
Question I have is this the last public hearing? Isn't this supposed to be something by the selectmen?
Yes.
Selectmen are-
Yes.
selectmen
Yes.
here to answer?
Yeah.
There's one behind.
Yeah,
The select board will have one, it'll be strictly an informational meeting.
When's that going to
yeah.
Yeah, there's a requirement that anything that goes on the referendum, that the selectmen have an informational or an open night on. But, at that point, it's not us so much as them, and it's sort of, where it is where it is.
But it will be here to answer questions.
At that meeting, do you mean, Jen? I guess we could be,
We should be.
we'll be present there.
We're the ones that know the
It's
answers.
like school meeting. We have to wait for Rick to invite us, and then we'll.
It's their table that night, we'll be out there.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I guess I know.
Yes,
I'm not sure, I can't hear very well, but, I don't know if she just asked the same question, but I noticed that this is just a plan. So if this is voted on the 13th and it passes, on town meeting and passes, there are some things in here that should be implemented within 1 to 2 years. other things in here that has a timetable of around 5 to 7 years. So, how does that work? I mean, will you go, for instance, there's a few things in here about Brownfield Historical Society should implement a plan of their own to, have a history book or whatever, if you will. So, in 25, they should have a plan. Is that that's basically what you're saying?
So the interesting thing is the state, for every single strategy, the state said you have to say who is doing it, what they're doing, and when it's going to be done. But we didn't want to say, by June, these people must do this. So we worded it in hopes that what we'll do moving forward. So if the plan passes in June, our hope is we'll reach out to get volunteers to be part of an implementation committee. And I imagine that committee will be made up of subcommittees working on each chapter. So say for the Historic Society, maybe a few people would get together. They would look at the strategies and say, okay, what can we do right away? What can we wait a while on? And that timeline isn't strict. So if they want to put together a book that might be 3 years rather than 1 or 2, that's fine. What the state will say when they come back in 5 years is, okay, of those 10 strategies, did you do anything? We want to be able to say, of those 10 strategies, 2 were accomplished, 1 is in progress, and 1 might be the town doesn't want to do it. So the idea is those interested subcommittees will work with others in town to say, is this something the Historical Society wants to do? Is this something the library wants to do? And then work together to see if there's any momentum or interest in doing that, and then work toward it.
So each individual strategy that you have for future or whatever, some of those have to go before the time you voted on.
Right.
That's just to make the state happy.
Well, it's to help us think about it too. So some of them might say, we should really have, a link to this on the town website. That doesn't require a vote. It would require us going and talking to Alvina and saying, can you put this on the town website? So some of them are very simple and straightforward. Some of them are more involved, where, if we talk about, a new firehouse, that's more involved than, putting something on the town website. So a lot of it can be done just by the subcommittee, planting trees or fixing up, the planters around the community center or something. That can be done by a small group. Others that are more involved would have to go for a town vote.
I have an example might help. One example might be for forestry, make the best management practices booklets available at the town office. So
Would you say it again?
One example for forestry, chapter forestry, and some other ones, natural history, make available the best management practices booklet.
Well, who would come up with the best plan?
No, the state has a booklet called Best Management Practices. And then people can use that if they're doing work on their land.
But what if they don't? What if
They're not doing it now, some people are.
Some are.
Some are, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, so I think what Susan's saying, some of it is just education,
Yeah.
getting a hold of the materials that are already there and educating people about it. I mean, one example of that is something that we did at the library with the pollinator fair. And we wanted to make people more aware of native plantings, and we had a pollinator fair and native plants and seeds and all that, and had a lot of material there, and had beekeepers come in. So I mean, it kind of spread the word, and people got excited about it. I mean, some people got really excited about it.
Yeah.
People coming from other towns to find out more about what we were doing and how to spread the word about it. So it really didn't cost anybody anything.
Another example is that in the survey there was a lot of desire expressed for elderly housing, and that is going to be a big project. But the implementation committee can do a lot of the groundwork and then bring what they come up with to the select board or any other group in the town that would have a say in how, if it passes, if it gets built, and how it's done, and, you know, can we get a group, an organization in to fund it? So, you know, there's a lot of things that the select board doesn't have time to research. But as volunteers, I think with an interest in one area or another, we can do the research, we can do the groundwork, and then take it to the selectmen or the town or whoever is appropriate, and then have the town take it from there. But it will, you know, foreseeably save a lot of work for overworked people.
You said it will be between the select group, determine on what's going on. Isn't that what we have the selectmen for? Or is there going to be somebody above the selectmen or below the selectmen? The selectmen don't have to answer. Who's going to determine what goes on and what doesn't?
Well, with the implementation committee, which is a little bit misleading, but that's the term that the state uses, and that's the term the state wanted us to use. So after this is all over, after it's voted on, what we'll be doing, if it passes, what we'll be doing is we'll be reaching out to people, and we're doing it right now, to join the implementation committee. Because the more people we have, the better off we are. So what the implementation committee will do, let's just say if they go to the housing chapter, they'll start up, they'll take a look at all the strategies, and they'll see which ones are immediate, which ones are 1 to 3 years, 3 to 5 years, so forth and so on. And then they'll start addressing them. And then that strategy typically suggests that they go to the select board and say, I'll give you an example. Do we have a need for affordable housing in the town? And then that's the first decision that has to be made. And then the second decision is, what are we going to do about affordable housing? And the people who are on the implementation committee can do that research and then present it to the select board. And let's just say...
You keep saying select board. Are you talking select board that is set up, or are you talking the select men? Or select person?
Yep, the current
select person who's in, that we, the town, put in charge.
It's the 3 folks that are in there now, and who's ever in there next year, the following year, and so forth and so on.
So they get final say, yay or no, nay, on what's going on.
You know what? To a degree, like when we present something to the select board, they might come back to us and say, we don't agree with that, we don't want to push it forward. We'll push back and say, well, let the people decide that. You know, put it as an article. They may say, we agree 100%, let's create an article. So for most of these, unless it's a policy, you know, strategy, for most of these, like what should we do about affordable housing, we would have to come up with a concrete plan, like maybe working hand in hand with Housing Concepts, or there's another organization in the state of Maine that we can go to and see if we can get funding to put up some affordable housing. And then it'll be presented to the people at the annual town meeting.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah, in June, if this is voted on and accepted, is that immediately null and void the existing comprehensive plan, or is this just going to be an addendum to it to be used with the existing plan?
What will happen is, and I believe the way the article is written is that to vote for this plan, and it'll be a substitution for the 1991 plan.
So the old plan will immediately become null and void?
Correct, if the folks vote for it.
So what happens in the interim between that becoming null and void and the new plan becoming effective? What's the time span?
We don't have one. In other words, what we would do is the committee would start to create the implementation committee. And once we get people who volunteer to participate in that, we'll present all those names to the select board, so the select board knows who's involved. And then we'll start taking each chapter. So, you know, if we had 13 people, one of those people would be in charge of one of the chapters. And here, people who wrote those chapters, you know, for instance, Lisa did historical chapter. She would head up the historical chapter. Facilities, Steve did. He would head up facilities. And then hopefully we would have enough people to fill all those chapters so we don't have people duplicating them. Because that took a tremendous amount of time to write these chapters. Because we didn't have 13 people, you know, like we had to, you know, do double duty, so to speak. So once we have that, Vinny, we'll then present that group, and then we'll start having regular meetings to address the strategies in each chapter.
So there will be a gap between the existing one and the new one, where there will be no comprehensive plan? I'm not sure, I'm just asking.
So, it was explained to me once that the comprehensive plan 1991 is a living document. If we vote to adopt the 2023 plan, the 91 becomes dead, and the 2023 plan becomes the living document.
I have a better word for it.
Okay.
It becomes history.
Okay.
The one other thing, Vinny, that's important to recognize right now, or to realize right now, is that the state does not recognize Brownfield as having a comprehensive plan. Even though the town adopted it in 1991, and it's still the Brownfield plan, it doesn't hold any water with the state.
If, just to clarify something, the vote's gonna take place on June 13th. So if it's voted in on June 13th, technically it wouldn't take effect until July 1st. So that would be an interim. If you already have a list of people, that technically the first selectmen's meeting of the new fiscal year, you could present a list of individuals to the selectmen that would be appointed to run these various chapters, so it would take effect. You'd have to basically 20 days to institute
I
it.
think that's optimistic to think we would have a full slate of people.
Well, you could have, I mean, even somebody had to do, but there's nothing in this plan that causing a 5-day lapse is going to allow anything to come earth-shattering. And that just, there's another question that I had, and I probably shouldn't be asking questions. But if, I'm going to pick on the fire station because you mentioned it.
Yeah.
So that's mentioned in this plan that we're going to build a new fire station.
Well, no, it doesn't say that.
Okay, well, so but there's growth for the fire station.
We should explore.
Explore. So if we explore, and the state comes back in 5 years and says, you know, have you followed through on this? No, the taxpayers voted down the funding for the fire station, so the state's not gonna, like, nothing legal is gonna happen.
No, there's nothing, even with all the strategies and goals in here, none of it is mandated.
So
What the state wants to know is, have you done anything with this?
that's just, so if it goes to town vote and there's something that requires $10,000, and it goes to town vote, and the townspeople say no, and when the state comes knocking, you can give them the list and say, yeah, we've done this, but the town said no, but we've still done it, we still proposed it, and the state's not gonna say, well, you know.
No, they were very clear about that they don't expect every single thing to be implemented. They expect it to be looked at, explored, so that you can come back and say, we did consider it, the town did not.
Yes, ma'am.
What's the last improvement that was done from the 1991 comp plan?
There's a sheet out in the hallway that Lisa put together that compares the 91 plan and the 2023 plan. I think, doesn't that sheet say what has, so this sheet is out in the hallway that compares the two plans.
It's not inclusive of everything.
Yeah.
In 91, I think it's set to
So
70.
I guess my question is that if there's a little bit of a gap between the time that we get up, if this passes, if we get up and running with the new plan, then we would be okay with the lapse?
So this sheet says, it has a list of, from the 1991 plan, a summary of what was recommended and implemented. It's not inclusive, but that it has a list of many of those things. One of them is the library was moved and approved. the municipal building was completed. So it lists everything that was in the 91 plan and implemented. Some things that were partially addressed, there's a list of them, and some things suggested but not addressed. So they're all on this sheet. That doesn't mean that there was something wrong with the 91 plan. An awful lot was accomplished. It's a great plan. But it's just the information in it now is outdated. If you look at the 1991 plan, it's a different population, everything is different. The schools are different. We couldn't use the data from that plan and just put in new strategies. It wouldn't work. The state wouldn't have accepted it. So we have to update. Believe me, we would have loved to do that. The state wouldn't accept it. So we have to get all that up to date, but then build on what the 1991 plan suggested. Take all those things that are suggestions we should continue with, and then add new strategies, new goals based on what the townspeople said they would like to see.
I think one other thing that's important to clarify is that when you take a look at the 2023 comprehensive plan, no matter which chapter you look at, almost without fail, every paragraph or every two paragraphs is in response to a question that was posed by the state. And the state did that, I believe, because they were getting comprehensive plans in and they were all over the place. So in 2008, they said, let's make this easy for everybody. Let's give them the things we want them to think about. So in any chapter, there may have been 20 questions that they wanted us to address. How many houses do you have? How many, great ponds do you have? How many water resources do you have? Like is forestry a big industry in your town? And we had to respond to those. So when you read a chapter, those paragraphs are in response to something they wanted us to think about. And then if you go to the strategies, they would pose questions that might say, how are you going to handle this? And then you would come up with a strategy. And one of the ones that really kind of doesn't, I don't know why it sticks in my mind, but it doesn't pertain to Brownfield. What's in there is how are you going to handle parking? So, of course, we responded that, we really don't have a big concern with parking. There's a little bit of a problem down on 160, the hiking trail, so forth and so on. But those are the type of things. So the state, in a sense, did a good job. But it was probably a 50-page, a 60-page document that we had to go through for the entire comprehensive plan. So in a sense, that made it easier, because now we knew what we needed to respond to. And the state was extremely helpful. I'm originally from New Jersey, and in New Jersey, if you call somebody up, like in the department, they're screaming at you before you would say hello. Up here, everybody was cordial, helpful, polite. If they didn't have the answer, they would send us to, whomever could give us that answer. They were terrific. So we had a lot of help from the state, and in particular from Tom Rigliolo, who was the head state planner. He was terrific. And it worked out well for us because we had those resources.
So just this document that is before us has been presented to the state, and the state has said, you dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's, and you're good to send this.
Twice.
Twice.
We
Okay.
submitted it once before we started having informational hearings, and then from that, we had feedback, and we changed some things, and sent it back in, and they sent it back to yes.
Okay.
So, but I'd just like to say, Joe touched on it, and it was really what I was thinking, but when this all started from the state to us, the 50-page document was these same questions. Everything has a topic. Every chapter is a topic. And it's really an exercise in provoking thought in the town to try to answer the questions the state is posing to us, which they see as potential issues for the state as in growth. So all the responses to us are the answers that they're posing to us. In the green sheet there, you can see the answers they're asking. And in the comprehensive plan, you can see our answers. And they're asking us for strategies for everything and goals for everything, or which one's first, whatever. But we set different timelines because we just couldn't say the same answer that everybody has to do something in 6 months or a year or 5 years or whatever. So what's most important in our minds about which one might need to be 6 months, which one might need to be, our suggestion would be for a year or 2 years or 5 years. Something's more important than others. And it was really up to us, based on what they were asking, where's our issue first?
And so this becomes a guideline for thinking and planning for anyone with enough gumption to do something.
Right.
Yes.
The other important thing to realize about this document is this is an aid, and not only is it a guideline, but it should be thought-provoking. So if you read the chapter on housing, let's say, and a question comes up, you should bring it up to the implementation committee and say, hey, I noticed that I had this thought about this, and I don't think this is addressed. It can be added, and it can be added very easily. We don't have to go back to the state and say, oh, we're going to add this new strategy. But in 5 years, when they would like to see an update from us, then we can include it in there. Hey, we added these 5 other topics that came up, and here's what we did with them, or here's when we're going to do them. So that's another thing. Keep it in mind. Read this. I mean, some of the things to me are I don't want to say startling, but they're really, when you start to find out how many houses there are in Brownfield, how many single houses, how many double, two-family houses, it's really interesting stuff. And when you see how the population, and the demographics of the population, how many, kids do we have that are under 10 years old? How many people are 18 years old? How many people are over 65 years old? When you start to see that, it really gives you a much clearer picture of what Brownfield is like. And those are the things that can be thought-provoking, so that, this is a growing document as we move forward. And trust me, if you have an idea, don't ever think that it's stupid. Bring it up, and we'll be glad, to take it under consideration and see what we can do to do something about it.
Sue's mentioned the water quality strategy in here. I found the water resource chapter really interesting because it did provoke a lot of thinking on my part. I really hadn't thought a lot about sources of pollution in the town and what can be done to mitigate some of those concerns. Or just something as simple as one of these strategies. The CEO should advise new home builders and those citizens who are drilling a replacement well to try to maintain 100 feet between the well and the septic system as recommended by the Maine Department of Environmental Protection. That may be something that a homeowner just didn't think about, and yet they're talking to the CEO, and you can say, you know what, you really need to think about placing it somewhere else for like the long-term viability of your property. There are things like that just help people think about what is better for yourself, your property, and for the environment. So
another important issue with wells is how many wells in Brownfield have gone dry. To try to find that out, and then maybe even find the reason for it, is going to be an important strategy to take a look at. I'm not saying that we would have a solution to it, but it certainly would be interesting to know, how many people in the past year had to drill new wells. So that's another example of, how we're trying to improve the town, finding out more information.
I was just wondering how it meshes with the land use ordinance and the planning board.
Well, realistically, they're not particularly the same thing. This talks about reviewing some of those documents to see if they should be updated, but again, it's like so many other things. It's look at and see if you need to do anything, not you must change this to be this. There are some segments that talk about revising to meet new standards, or revising to see if the town would like to change some things, but they're really sort of a separate set of entities.
So anything that's an existing ordinance is still, anything that is an existing ordinance is still an ordinance.
So here's an example of something that just happened recently. Last night, the select board and the planning board met with an attorney, Ben McCall from Jensen Baird, and we talked about LD 2003. And if you don't know what LD 2003 is, it's there's more to it. The long and short of it is, it's considered the affordable housing bill. And I think all of us at the meeting last night agreed that it's more for urban areas. Now, and what it's allowing is additional dwelling units to be placed on a single-family property. And, you know, there's other ramifications, and there's a few things that, you know, I think you have to do in order to be able to do that septic system, water, so forth and so on. Well, in Portland, that's easy to do. Just tie into the central water system and the central sewer system. But in Brownfield, it's a different story. So one of the things that really ticked people off throughout the state is that it took away home rule, which means Brownfield can't make their own decision. The state's saying, you have to do this. Yes, there are some things that you can still require people to do, but the fact that that is gone upset a lot of people. So before, what they did was yesterday they had a public hearing on LD 665, which is asking, and let me back up a second, all towns are supposed to implement LD 2003 by July 1st. So you have to change your land use ordinance by July 1st. And that's why we brought the attorney in, because, I mean, we're not experts. And he was excellent, by the way, Ben McCall. Anyway, so that he's going to draw up some changes to that land use ordinance there. Doesn't really have anything to do with the comprehensive plan, but it's just, Jeannie, since you brought up about the land use ordinance, that's one thing that's going to be changing, or there's going to be a recommendation to change it by July 1st. That's something you should go online, go to maine.gov, look up LD 2003 and read it. It's kind of an eye-opener. But the other legal document that's before Augusta right now, I don't, do you call it the House or the Assembly or the State House? The State House is for towns under 10,000 population, they won't apply to them. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do up there, and hopefully they'll make it easy, but we'll see.
Well, with no further hands raised, I would, who won the prize?
The first 10 minutes of slides were different. The ones showing, talking about Naples, Casco, da-da-da. They weren't there before.
Okay, you won the prize, Bill.
There. All right. Now, what did I win?
We'll let you know later.
Oh, okay.
Help us
Bill,
roll
if the
chairs.
comprehensive plan passes, if it passes, the implementation committee will decide what the prize is.
All right, fair enough. If everybody could give these people a hand for all of that.